Should be live now. Hello and welcome to Cast.live. This is a program called Catalysis, right? Where we look into the proposals on Project Catalyst. If you have no idea what that is, I am going to actually be expanding more on that in a few moments. So today we're going to be covering or introducing, I suppose, a new proposal on the new fund, which is FUND 3, called the FLEMING protocol. And to basically talk to us about that today, we have Andre. Hello, Andre. Hey.
Right.
Right, so let me just get my notes going over here so I know what the hell I'm talking about. Ta. Okay, yeah, right. So, Cardano. What is Cardano and what is Catalyst? Cardano is, or you can think of it as the computer network behind the ADA cryptocurrency, right? So you can think of, the currency as the blood and the computer is the body, right? I suppose that's kind of like an apt explanation there. And so, what is Catalyst, or what's Project Catalyst? Project Catalyst is a fund that basically gets money from the treasury to basically, fund projects, from the community. It doesn't specifically have to kind of be a technical thing. It can be, sort of like a digital, problem, wherever you're in the world, if you have a problem that you think, oh, you know what, actually, if I could, communicate the value of this problem and, get some funding for it, yeah, that would be something which, the community, you'd have the environment to basically, come along and communicate your idea and engage with the community and evolve that idea and get, collaborators as well, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff, it's not just the funding, it's, the whole journey that you actually sort of benefit from. So, yeah, and yeah, to quickly just go back, the treasury is actually funded by fees from the network, right? So you've got the computer network and you've got the currency. So whenever a transaction happens, a fraction of that fee goes into the treasury, and that's where all of this money comes from. At the moment, as the title should show, it's around 500,000 US dollars equivalent that is available to be distributed to whichever projects will actually end up getting voted on by the community at the end of the round. Cool, right? So, Andre, care to introduce yourself in a sentence or three?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm Andre. So I'm the founder of Fleming Protocol, which obviously we'll talk about the detail of that in due course. And yeah, I've had a background in health and life sciences for the past 9 years or so. And yeah, I'm obviously quite interested in decentralized applications, and the kind of health and life sciences and the kind of blockchain aspect kind of came together this year, and hence why I'm here.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for actually, taking the time out, to sort of come and actually communicate yeah, the proposal to the community, because I feel like it's actually quite valuable to, to put faces to proposals, because at the moment, it's just you have a lot of text, text and maybe some graphics, which, whilst good, it doesn't actually sort of communicate, a lot of the value behind, and, it doesn't communicate much about the people behind these proposals. So, yeah, so thanks for coming on. So I'm just
No
gonna
problem.
give a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today, right? The idea is we're going to have a very concise conversation here. It won't last more than 10 minutes once we actually get into it. The intro bit aside. Yeah, so it won't last more than 10 minutes. We're going to have three sections. The first section will take about 4 minutes, and we'll discuss the problem space and what sort of the current hodgepodge of sort of makeshift solutions are out there. And then the second bit will again spend around 4 minutes talking about the solution itself, right? So talk about the solution, basically the proposal, and as well as, what who is being sought out, right? Who are you seeking in terms of building out the team, etc., expertise, and that kind of thing. And then big picture, again, still within the second section, talk about big picture, like ultimately what is this proposal aspiring to be, but then, you know, tell us like what's the minimum viable product that you're starting off with. And then shifting on to tokenomics, you know, having a little bit of a conversation about tokenomics there. Tick. And then lastly, the third bit that we'll touch on is legacy, right? Which we'll just spend like 2 minutes on and talk about, basically in an ideal world, like if this works, what would that world kind of look like? Right. So, idea scale. Okay, so I'm just gonna actually take off this graphic. And then we can just jump right into the first question, right? There we go. Cool. Okay, right. So, first bit. Actually, let me get the timer going here. So let's discuss the problem space, and then, you know, later on, or you can sort of go in between both. You know, talk about the sort of the current state of, you know, the makeshift solutions.
Yeah, sure. So I guess in terms of the problem space, so you know, I'm guessing, you know, people obviously know what pharma is and they know the industry, but it's been quite problematic and has been in quite a few ways. So I guess the first point is around you know, the kind of pharma industry as it stands. It doesn't tend to gear itself towards helping public health too well. So they're very much focused on what products can improve their profit margins, really. And obviously that doesn't necessarily correlate with the wider public health. So if, for example, one statistic is, you know, 10% of the R&D expenditure goes to 90% of the diseases that cause the most preventable deaths. So the kind of the matching of that just isn't correct, and there's a reason for that. So so there's a large need in that respect. And I guess at the moment, the industry works in quite an insular way, because obviously they have the patent model. So they're not really keen on, you know, sharing information, and obviously that stifles innovation and it kind of stops the wider community from learning from that information. So it has a lot of implications. Obviously that was slightly different with the COVID pandemic. You did see a lot of open source in during that period, and you know, we saw a lot of benefits, and we really learned about the disease very quickly, and we're able to produce a lot of therapeutics very quickly. So I think people are slowly reflecting on that. And I guess finally, just the kind of business model as it stands in the industry, it just isn't very productive. So, you know, the kind of rate of return on investment for most pharma companies nowadays, it's been on the decline, and it has been for, you know, decades. And in terms of the, you know, how much it costs to produce a drug, that there's been an exponential increase in that since the 1960s. And but if you look over the same period, the rate of innovation has stagnated, or in some cases it's declined. So yeah, combined with the declined rate of kind of returns and the stagnant innovation and the increasing costs, it's obviously a model that just isn't really going to work for much longer.
So that's interesting. Oh, okay, yeah, wow. That was actually really good. Like 2 minutes, like sharp. Okay, cool. So like in terms of trying to improve that situation, what are the current sort of makeshift solutions are sort of, I suppose, the community, maybe even through the pandemic, you know, like what have people sort of tried to put together that solve some of these issues?
Yeah, so for quite a few years, you have various initiatives which are taking place in various pockets of the internet. So so you've got, for example, the open source malaria fund, open source malaria, which is a group of people trying to find a new malaria drug in an open source way. You've got a group in America who are focusing on cancer, another group diabetes. There's a group in Canada focused on Alzheimer's. And obviously through COVID, there's various different platforms where people are trying to find therapeutics. So there are solutions, and, you know, people use GitHub as well, but it's all quite fragmented, as you can probably tell by my explanation, that there's not one single place for this to take place. And sometimes, like when you're researching a condition, you know, there can be a bit of overlap. So if you take diabetes, for example, and you've got the drug metformin, they've recently been trialing the use of that in cancer treatment, for example. So when things are happening in such an isolated way, these kind of opportunities can be missed. And I guess in addition to that, whilst these platforms exist, there isn't the kind of financial mechanisms and funding to help sustain that work. So a lot of people are just doing it because they're passionate about it. But ultimately, for that work to become a reality, it needs the funding to get there. And that's part of the solution I'm proposing. And I guess just finally, so where most of the money persists, it's with the pharma industry. And as I mentioned in the first section, they're very much not very keen on sharing information, and they're really in it just as most businesses are. But I think it's getting to the point where it's having a wider effect, and just it needs to change really.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, that was really helpful and sort of insightful and well put. You're well prepared. Okay, so section two. Again, 4 odd minutes on this bit. It kind of has 3 sections to it, so it will be I suppose a little bit awkward to kind of jump through them. But yeah, let's first start with the solutions bit, right? So, what's the solution, and what team are you sort of seeking out?
Yeah, so very quickly on the solution. So, just in essence, what I'm trying to do is an open source, decentralized drug discovery platform, which has the kind of mechanisms to help fund that work, so it can translate into to real treatments. Because as I mentioned, there's a need there that isn't being addressed, and a lot of this work tends to not make it because of that funding. So, and I guess that solution, it kind of takes 3 parts. So the first bit is obviously having the open source platform where, if you're a malaria researcher, you can kind of search, for various drug targets or molecules or any research in relation to malaria, and you can find collaborators, or you can share your data and information. So people might use that, or they might collaborate with you to develop that work further. So hopefully that will obviously lead to a lot more innovation and speed things up, and in that respect. So yeah, it's just having the interface for people to share information and collaborate. Really, I think it's very important to speed up innovation. And the second point is having the monetization to help fund that work. So I know we said we're going to talk about tokenomics later on in this interview, and but yeah, so in summary, there's going to be a kind of crowdfunding mechanism. So scientists who want to advance a piece of work, they can set up a crowdfund, and obviously people can donate to that, but there's also financial incentives for the donators. So it's more of a two-way relationship, and hopefully that'll build a longer term relationship to the point where the product becomes a reality. And also, just very quickly, there'll be a grants program. So I'm hoping to have a DAO as part of the platform who would give grants. So obviously users would need to submit proposals to get those grants, and obviously the community would need to vote on whether that's worthy of money or not. And yeah, I guess finally the kind of key point is the attribution of the work. So while someone may search and share a piece of data, there needs to be credited for that piece of work, and there are licenses in real life to help with that. But obviously the way the blockchains are, it would really help with that kind of immutable attribution and being able to link back to who uploaded that information.
Yeah.
So
cool. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, now quickly, like, so in terms of teams, like what if you were to say, okay, 3 sort of skill sets that you feel that you need in the sort of near future to sort of get some traction, what would you sort of say that is?
Yeah, so I guess the kind of key things is to have kind of a technical co-founder to join me with this. So obviously I'm a non-technical person, but I understand the kind of technicalities of blockchain as being followed with it. But someone who can the kind of coding skills and who's probably led on technical projects and has been able to who'll be able to deliver that, because I think the kind of smart contracts and the incentives it'll be quite a technical aspect of it. So we need someone who can actually build that. I'm also exploring through my network a scientific co-founder as well. So I do have some advisors who have been in open source science and professors for decades, and they're looking at who could maybe join us as well. So yeah, those are the main skills.
Okay, cool. So, big picture. What is this idea trying to sort of aspire to or try to achieve? And then, like, where are you starting at? Like, what's the MVP?
Yeah, so I think if I wanted to be like really ambitious about it and what the kind of end goal is, it's definitely to have a new system to kind of produce these treatments and drugs for the world, because the current system, it just isn't really working for the wider society. It's helping and working for pharma. It's making some people rich in the short term, but it hasn't been working for a while. So just in essence, a new system which could replace that. So obviously right now I'm focusing on the drug discovery phase. So that's where the innovations are kind of born. But you also need to look at clinical trials and the manufacturing and the regulatory approval. So something down the line I've been thinking of in terms of the clinical trials. So they have something called in silico trials, where you can basically do a computer simulation of the trials to replicate a human physiology of a certain condition. It's something that some of the regulators are looking into at the moment, and that would massively drive down the cost of developing drugs. So but that's obviously a bit further down the line. And I guess in terms of manufacturing, I know this talks about 3D printers, and so maybe there's something that we can do there. And also we're just having that system on a blockchain in a decentralized way and self-sustaining. And I guess in terms of the MVP, so what I'm hoping to deliver with this grant, if I'm successful, is to obviously have the open source platform and have the interface, which is useful. And so if you are a scientist, you can find the information you need depending on the disease you're looking at, and you can share that information. And then obviously having the financial mechanisms to sustain that. So those are kind of two key priorities for the next 6 months, and that'll be the MVP. And in terms of the grant system and a DAO, that will come at a later point.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, right. So now let's jump into tokenomics. Give us sort of like your overview, thoughts around tokenomics.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the kind of two key points of being able to fund the projects is the crowdfunding. So I'll just briefly talk about that. So there's something called token bonding curves. Well, I'm taking a version of that. So it's called augmented bonding curves. Where in essence, a person would donate tokens to a smart contract, and they would receive project-specific tokens in return, and those can increase in value over time depending on the demand of those tokens. And the more likely the project is to succeed, obviously the more in demand those tokens will be. So that provides funds to the product team, but also provides tokens back to the donators, and if it's successful, then it's beneficial in both ways. It could raise quite a lot of money for the team as well as for the individual, and they could probably earn their donation back. So that's one way, and also, as I mentioned, the grant system as well. So I'm thinking of having a utility token, although some of the people in the community have suggested, well, do you need one, and should you just use ADA instead as the kind of token to run the system? So that's something I need to consider. But yeah, as you kind of mentioned, with the fund, if you have a token that's transacting on the platform, obviously a portion of that will go to the grant system. So each transaction will help to develop the funds, and that will be distributed to members who get the vote.
Awesome. Cool. And again, just for anyone watching this, just a reminder, this is a program that goes over 6 weeks. So this is still early days, and we're going to be having ongoing conversations where we actually get more and more into detail. Like, for example, all that Andre just outlined there, it would make sense to actually sort of visualize it, right? So in some follow-up conversation, the idea is sort of in between both of us here would have a section which is sort of like graphic that'll create and sort of it will break down the ideas, and that makes more sense to sort of do closer towards the end when you've got more of a solid idea of what the best approach is, right? Okay,
Yes.
right. Yeah, so now moving on to number three, drum roll. So roughly 2 minutes on this one, right?
Yeah, sure.
Reset. Stop. Right. So legacy. In an ideal world, if this works, like, because in a way this kind of touches on the big picture thing that you spoke about,
Yeah.
but perhaps you'll be able to kind of, I don't know, maybe phrase it differently. You've given some thought
Mhm.
to framing this in the context of the legacy and maybe how it affects other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what does it look like, a future world, if with this idea working?
Yeah, so I guess as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of diseases don't have the treatments to prevent them causing death in the world, and that's quite prevalent, especially in poor countries. So I guess if this does work as it's meant to, then that burden will be massively reduced. And I think the World Health Organization estimates that there's around 2 billion people in the world who don't even have access. So in an ideal world, if this works, then it would improve access to those people. But even in countries like the UK and other Western countries, increasingly people can't afford these treatments, and governments can't afford them either. So would hopefully help to address that. Um, so
Hmm.
yeah, it's just having that wider impact that's beneficial to the wider public, really, because at the moment the benefits to the public on the current system are very limited.
Hmm. Cool.
Hmm.
That brings us to the end of our conversation. And actually, thankfully the network gods actually, shone their light upon us.
Yeah,
And yeah, exactly, yeah, because before this we were sort of having quite glitchy network conditions, but thankfully it behaved, so that's super awesome. Yeah, so Andre, thank you very much again for basically, yeah, taking the time out, and for actually putting this idea out, out there in the world. I think you'll actually make a bunch of value, even if, like, worst case scenario, it inspires someone else who comes along and like does something similar, or and sort of get something going. Right. So hopefully, I hope you've kind of, had a decent enough experience, here in this conversation, and that, you'll return in the future and basically sort of, share updates, and not just, within Fund 3, but also, much further down the line.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I'll be happy to.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Cool. I'm just going to quickly do a outro. Right. So if you liked what you just saw, yeah, you can go to Cardano .ideascale.com. There, yeah, you can basically find out, all that you need to find out about the project Catalyst. And yeah, and also, other proposers, right? Whether it's in Fund 3 or future funds, if you're watching this in the future, hello, time traveler. Yeah, reach out to me. The point of catalysis, as I said in the opening, is to actually look into the process of catalyst, the agent, right? And yeah, think of me as a person who basically be able to help you sort of formulate and sort of communicate your thoughts, right? Because it doesn't make sense that as a proposer you should be sort of like a pro at video and sort of communications, like that's part of this whole decentralized thing, right? Yeah, so think of cast.live, and yeah, just reach out to me. Go to yeah, cast.live, as you can see there. So it's cast spelled with 3 A's .live, and on there, yeah, you can reach out to me via Twitter. All the links are there via Twitter. Just DM, direct message, or via Discord. Hop on the Discord. There's a few of us there. So yeah, hopefully this has been actually insightful, and yeah, I hope to speak to more people in the days to come and months and years to come. Cool. Cheers.